This has been an interesting week for Energy Security Watch, as the global energy story is still dominated by the Strait of Hormuz, which was blocked for 3 months, but now slowly is starting to recover. The geopolitical fallout is reshaping the energy security debate, and it's exposing the fragility of fossil fuel supply chains. But while clean energy is seen as the solution by some, there are now calls against the UK's net zero policies. Joining me on the panel today is Dion George, a former South African Environment Minister who attended the recent ARC conference in London, and Matthew Campbell, Energy Specialist at C5 Capital. Welcome to the panel today, and how are you, Bert?
Very well, thanks, Linda. Good to see you.
Very good. Surviving in the heat.
Yeah, we're doing this during a heat wave. It before being noted, if everybody looks flushed, that is the reason. So, I'd like to start with you, Dion. You went for the ARC conference this week, and there was a debate about energy there. So what did you observe?
Well, yes, indeed, I did go, and it was very interesting. I mean, because ARC sort of gets positioned in the media as being in a particular space, the specific view. The fact was that there were a lot of divergence, not specifically in the energy space, but on other matters. But on energy, I mean, there's a deep wave going on in London economic, and I'm wearing my jacket, as you can see. And the reason for that is because I had an air conditioner on my table, action. So of course, I certainly believe in air conditioning, and it is necessary, and we have to have these things because life has to be sensible, life has to be comfortable, etc. So I think these are kind of given. The fact was that there is an energy shortage in the world, and the UK and other countries have been focused on net zero. And there was huge criticism for the UK's focus on net zero because of the impact that it's having on the economy, the price of energy, etc. So I think that the main argument has been that, of course, we need to make sure that we respond. If there is a climate crisis, then we need to respond. But then the question is, how do we do that? Now, even in the band is up for quite a lot of criticism for these particular stance on this matter. But of course, when I was the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment in South Africa, I had lots of these with Miliband and others, and Lisa was a COP, etc. So I think that the argue and say, well, we know there is no such thing as climate change and the world is not meeting. I mean, that does not make sense. The fact of the matter is, here we are, this sweltered energy. The Earth is losing up, and Europe is eating up faster than other places. It's just numbers. You can't ignore those numbers. So I think that in my view, is a given. But of course, how you then respond to that. And it is so that the greener, newer energies, etc., the wind that gets a lot of criticism, etc., it does tend to be more extensive in that initial instance. But let's, for example, think about UK energy. UK energy, once upon a time, was considered to be a swear word. It was, really people would rally against it, etc. Now, force is changing because nuclear energy technology has, in fact, improved. We've got a much cleaner way to do use, and therefore, it's something to be looked at. So, you say that we must forget about renewable, we must forget about this situation on the climate changing, and that we must just focus on fossil fuel because the North Sea is full of oil and let things go there, and that's good for the UK and other places. I mean, of course, there is that argument, but we've got all this natural resources, why leave them in the ground? So I think it's about there the balance is found. And I think that that's what the argument was all about. I think the central thesis was that there is a particular view, an activist view that gets taken, and then the one extreme gets pushed. And I think that that's the problem, because then the two sides drift apart. I think that the center lies, somewhere in the center lies the way we need to go. So, for example, we need baseload, and that should be nuclear. And there is also a space at the moment for fossil fuels because, of course, it's the dominant source, but it is so that our planet is heating up. We do need to reduce the carbons, etc. So I think in an extreme argument, the extreme view then actually gets kind of lost because, we have to face the facts. So I think that's my takeaway from R. I mean, people have very strong views, they're entitled to it, but I don't see that Eric Miliband and whose UK government have gone completely off the rails. They have got something there that they must respond to, but don't have to go too far. And I'm reading also about councils wanting to prevent people from using air conditioning. I mean, that's just silly, so we really do need to be sensible, and that's what I'm hoping that isn't what it will ultimately do.
Well, I think one day we need to have a discussion why London has literally no air conditioning. Matthew, what was interesting, we talked about nuclear and the importance about it, but France had to shut down 2 nuclear power reactors this week because of the heat, because of extreme heat. Bordeaux apparently was 44 degrees.
Yeah, Linda, that's right. And this is where the apparent difficulties between marrying energy security and climate policy are most salient. So at 11:45 on Monday night, EDF, which is the French nuclear operator, shut down the Golfec power plant, which is the second largest in the country. And this is because the river that fed it, which is called the Garonne, surpassed a level of 28 degrees Celsius. And basically what these nuclear power plants do is they take the water from the river and they put it in a big cooling tower, and it draws off that excess heat and effectively means that your reactor and your power plant isn't overheating. Now, the issue here is the reason that limit is set, and it's across the entirety of France, is to protect the fish. And obviously this is a very noble cause, but when you're in the worst heat wave that the continent has had since 1947, you may wish to look at relaxing these climate policies or these environmental policies when you need everybody to be running their air conditioning, to keep people alive because people are dying. And then you're right, there are further plants. So on Thursday, we had a plant at Bugey that have also shut down for exactly the same reason, but on different rivers. And I think the challenge you have here is France's energy policy is a fantastic one. In the 1970s, under the Mesmer plan, they had a massive nuclear build-out. And this has served them very well. They get about 70% of their electricity from nuclear, meaning that the energy costs in France are normally significantly cheaper than in neighboring countries, and they're not as exposed to say, natural gas prices like Germany and the UK. But these kind of issues that you're getting around operating these nuclear facilities are expanding. There was a heat wave in the early 2000s where, again, EDF had to shut down several reactors, and they lost in the region of 5 to 5.5 terawatt hours in a single summer. In context, that is like a city the size of Lyon, what it would consume in an entire year. So we're talking a significant amount of electricity lost. What they then did in response was a massive investment program to have these kind of cooling retrofits, upgrading what they'd put in place in the 70s to something more modern, and managed to reduce what they would have lost from 5.5 terawatt hours to 0.5, which is obviously very, very impressive. The problem you now have, in the 20 years since they did this program, the average temperatures are rising, the intensity of the heat waves is increasing, and thus the changes they made 20 years ago have proven now to be insufficient.
There were strong voices at the conference questioning the UK's net zero policy, including, according to attendees, Chris Wright, the US Energy Secretary, and Kimi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservative Party. Dion, do you want to comment?
Well, I mean, I don't get into going into the minutiae of the details of what individual people say. I think the position that I've taken, was certainly when I was a minister and then I was engaging with all others, is that I do think that there are people who have views that some might sound free. Now, of course, we believe in freedom of speech, so we believe that people can say whatever they like. But of course, it doesn't mean that anybody's going to agree with that. So I think there were some choice words made by various people regarding the sort of what was reported environmental lobby and etc. I mean, that were described in very colorful ways. And also there were some protesters that were outside the venue on the first day. I'm told that they were painting the green with the frogs. Now, unfortunately, it didn't stay very long because it was very, very hot. But I suppose it was very apt because they were literally demonstrating that, a boiling fog is thought a cinder, so it was quite powerful in a way. But I do think that the fact that people show up and are concerned about it, it's because never mind the lot of money that's poured into sort of environmental resistance spaces or whatever, or radical views. I think that we notice. I don't think that you look at your average person on the subway or on the underground in the morning, I catch the Bakerloo line, and then I know it's one of the oldest, that it doesn't actually has red on a proper aircon. They open the window in the front and it gets some rain, but unlike the other lines that are near, that it's very, very hot. And I think when people start getting uncomfortable, then you got to think about it and say, well, why is it that daily life, in the UK, daily life, is an extreme emergency warning. People are hiding and putting their computer, their laptops in the fridge. Was the UK is not built to get rid of heat, it's built within the heat. So it is a fact our world is changing. And I can, without referencing anybody, I think that it's very, very short-sighted. We just ignore that. Well, you know what? So what? Let's just carry on like we've done before. Well, it isn't the same. The world is adjusting, and you can have the species as one, it is like that. But the most important thing in managing your world is to do something about it. And the fact is, it was heating up very quickly. There's a reason for it, and it is fossil fuels, and therefore we cut back. That's why I'm going nuclear. Matthew's just been explaining the complexities there. I was also a minister for Fisheries as well. So, of course, we must talk about fish. You do not fish the fish even boiling or get boiled by the rate of bomb the nuclear reactor. That is not what we want to happen. But that's the fear out the balance. And I think that's why if somebody does take a view that it is considered to be extreme or radical, that can be very useful because then it frames a debate and then somewhere the middle can be found. So I think that's the way I like to go. And I think that's how the world will go. Is because if you ask your average person on the street, which I may be hard to define, I'm going to say, well, what's happening now? They're going to say it's really, really hot. He's heating up and something is even on. That's what they will say. And that something will just carry on burning the fossil fuels. But then, nothing is done. And the science isn't wrong. I know that there's the argument that Al Gore, there is projections and the suggestion were fast-forwarded now. New York would be half underwater, etc.
Yes.
But you don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball. But what we do know is we have science and we have information coming from us, and we're doing the best we can. And I think that's what's necessary. But I do think that nuclear is the way we have to go. Of course, it is greener and it is capable of being the cheapest form of energy over time. And I think that that's what's happening. Also, as we adapt with Tech Scholar, the demand will go up because they want artificial intelligence. We want some way they got to get the energy from that. And pumping out more oil and, putting in the atmosphere, I reckon that's going to actually cut what we need. So we do need to look another way.
He talks about Chris Wright saying the UK should embrace fossil fuels, but the US is totally embracing nuclear energy.
Committing, $17.5 billion to accelerate the development of 10 large nuclear reactors to meet skyrocketing power demand. Matthew, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so this is effectively an initiative between the US Department of Energy, Westinghouse, which is one of the largest nuclear reactor companies in the world, and also their two primary owners, which is Cameco, the major Canadian uranium miner, and Brookfield Asset Management. So this specific partnership is with the DOE's Office of Energy Dominance Financing, which is the name. And they have conditionally committed, $17.5 billion in these loan facilities. And really the purpose here is to finance what we call long lead items for up to 10 Westinghouse reactors in the United States. The construction for all of these needs to be up and running by 2030. And typically you'd see a build time in the region of maybe 7 to 10 years, depending on the specific site. And what Westinghouse have done is they've signed letters of intent with 7 utilities and energy companies across the United States, who I think at least 5 of them have each committed to building 2 reactors. So the benefit here for nuclear is that for a long time, the Western world has been building them in a very ad hoc manner. You maybe build 1 or 2 like Westinghouse did in Vogel, or you have EDF building 1 in Hinkley, and they're building 1 in Flamanville in France. And your problem is kind of twofold. Firstly, you don't have the kind of ongoing learning you would get from doing these projects. They're hugely complex. They're arguably some of the most complex things that humans have ever tried to do outside of maybe sending somebody to the moon. And so, when you're doing what France and America did in the 70s, or what China is doing now, and you're building dozens of these reactors, your engineers and your project management teams really learn how to do it. Yeah, your first few are maybe a little slow, or they overrun like we've seen in America and in the UK. But by your 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th reactor, you're doing it pretty efficiently. The difference, say, with the Chinese and the Western approach now is that every year China is building more nuclear reactors than the entire Western world built in the last 20 years. It's a mind-boggling difference. And so Western skills have just evaporated. This is why committing to 10 and ideally more is hugely beneficial. The other one, and what this loan specifically addresses, is in the supply chain. So when you're building a nuclear reactor, you need a couple of extremely large, highly specific pieces of equipment. The most notable of these is what you call a reactor pressure vessel. And this is basically an enormous piece of a single piece of steel, effectively. And you need these special presses that heat it and then press it with about 60 to 100,000 tons to create one single vessel without any imperfections. Your issue there is there are only about 6 places in the world that can do this, and it takes them a long time to do. So you can't just say, oh, I want it, you get it in a month. The lead times on these can be 5-7 years. And so in providing this financing, what it means is even before the sites are fully set up, or even before they're selected, Westinghouse can very confidently put in these orders with like the forges in Korea, there's one in Japan, there's one in France, one in the UK. Put those in now for when they need them 7 years down the line, and also give these companies, like say Sheffield Forgemasters in the UK, the confidence to invest in their facilities and expand them, knowing that they're not just going to build one, they're going to be building a dozen of these things. So just going back to what Dion was saying, following on from the ARC conference, decision makers are somewhat split on climate. Dion's far more politically sound than I. My personal view is either you believe in the science or you were dropped on your head as a child. It is a fact, and it's frustrating for a lot of us that the kind of climate policy is being pushed to the side. The one good thing in the United States is that, despite bipartisan splits on pretty much everything, the Democrats and the Republicans seem fairly aligned around nuclear. And it goes back to Obama, through Trump 1, through Biden and Trump 2. Each of them has had fairly pro-nuclear policies, and especially under this latest administration. And so when you couple it with this hard financing from the Department of Energy, plus the decent political consensus around this, it's really a fruitful environment for investment in the future nuclear build out in the United States.
Well, that was our first panel discussion. Thank you, Matthew Campbell. Thank you, Dion George, for your insights. And what we want to do in this panel discussion is get conversations going. So if you feel like commenting on what we said, please do.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Well, thanks very much, Linda. It was great to chat to you, and Matthew also.